Hello and welcome back to Joe's Art History Podcast, a podcast that celebrates all things art historical. With me, your host and your resident art historian, Joe McLaughlin. Welcome back, everyone. It is episode 58, and this week it is a solo episode that will see me deep dive into the incredible Banksy exhibition called Cut and Run, which is just taking place at the Glasgow Museum of Modern Art in the summer of 2023. The exhibition opened mid-June of this year and closed at the end of August. This was an incredibly exciting exhibition for lots of different reasons. At first, it was Banksy's first official exhibition in the UK in 14 years. Second of all, it was happening in my home city of Glasgow, which was so exciting, not just for myself, but for everybody in Glasgow. We got truly swept up in Banksy fever. And third, an incredible opportunity for Glasgow Museums which is the organisation, Glasgow Life, that is the organisation which runs Glasgow Museums, a great opportunity for them to show what they can do, and they did not disappoint. This was an incredible exhibition, and today I'm going to talk you through my thoughts, my experience in the build up to it, and what made this quite honestly one of the best exhibitions I've ever been to, for lots and lots of different reasons that I'll explain throughout the podcast. This was a true privilege to get to go and see, made more special by the fact that I got to take my family along and see it with them. And we also saw the exhibition at an incredibly unusual time, i.e. 1 o'clock in the morning, because Banksy knew it would be so popular that he decided to open the show more or less all night on the weekends. So the show itself, you could book tickets until 5 a.m, which is, I don't ever think has happened, bar when Tutankhamun's treasures came to the British Museum for the first time, I think in the 70s and the 80s, and that became a 24-hour exhibition. So it just kind of shows you the levels at which Banksy is now operating, and that he really thinks about the people. Also, Glasgow, we're out at the weekend, we enjoy a drink, we're up, the city is very much alive and kicking at 5 a.m. Anyway, I'm doing this episode because there was, of course, a finite amount of tickets, a finite amount of people that got to see the show. And for those of you that listen around the world who didn't get to see the show or experience the Banksy exhibition, I want to share this with you. I'll be sharing excerpts from the catalogue that I picked up as well, which is also still available to purchase, and I'll share more details of where you can get that at the end of the show. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, here are my thoughts on Cut and Run. 25 years card labour by Banksy. First of all, I want to start by saying there is so much to say about this exhibition, Cut and Run by Banksy. The show is initially retrospective. It's looking back over 25 years of his career. And I really do feel like this could be a 3-4 part episode. One discussing how I found the exhibition, another discussing the works that were there, another discussing Glasgow's input and what it meant for Glasgow museums, and then another discussing the layout and how people moved through, how people interacted with the works. There's so much to say, so I'm really going to try and be as precise as possible. But if you enjoy this episode and you want me to dig in a little more to the works that were on display and share with you some of the extracts from the catalogue, which I'll be doing throughout the episode anyway, but if you want to go into more depth on these things, I would really welcome that opportunity. So please do let me know first and foremost. But we have to start at the beginning, which is arriving and getting to the exhibition. So I actually heard about the show a bit like everybody else. There was no huge build up and marketing campaign. It was very much like, this exhibition's happening and it's opening in 2 weeks. Book your tickets now. And it took place over the summer, so middle of June to the end of August 2023. And of course, most of the tickets sold out very, very quickly. So what happened was they decided to open the exhibition late into the evenings, and from Friday and Saturday evenings open it till 5 a.m, which was I don't know if this has ever happened in Glasgow before, but it's never happened within my lifetime that I can remember an exhibition opening this late. And when I went to book my tickets a month before I was heading back to Glasgow, essentially the only tickets that were available were the early morning slots. So the first slot that was available to me was a 1 a.m. slot. And this was near the end of the exhibition run. And I booked a couple of tickets because I thought, if my friends don't want to come, my family definitely will. And it was a really exciting experience because the whole lead up to it, you know, staying up late. I mean, I know 1 o'clock's not late, but I'm not 18 anymore. Like, I'm well and truly in my bed by 1. I loved the idea that this exhibition I would be experiencing it in at a different time to what I'm normally used to, and also a different time that my brain is active and awake and really sort of pushing myself to interact with things in an environment at that time in the morning when I'm very much normally asleep, or on the odd occasion I'm out at that time heading home. So for me, even just booking a ticket for 1 a.m, the excitement and anticipation for this show was immediate. As I've mentioned in the introduction, I brought my family along with me, and what we had to do was we had to queue outside in order to get in. And I'm not going to lie, even at 1 o'clock in the morning, this place was rammed. It was completely full. There were several queues operating at one time, and everyone was entering in 15-minute slots. Of course, it's Glasgow. Of course, it's Scotland. You won't be shocked to hear it was, of course, raining. What I loved was the security guards were incredibly friendly. They were chatting to people in the queue. They were keeping up the energy. They were bringing out umbrellas for people that didn't have any. And just the whole build up to before even like arriving at the venue or getting through the door of the exhibition was an experience, and something that I will never ever forget. And I think Banksy's great at that. He creates these moments, and I think this is something that the whole show really talks about beautifully, is just look up and around you and appreciate the moments for what they are. And even if they're fleeting, even if it's a moment of graffiti and then it's taken away the next day by the council, it's a moment that you have lived and experienced. And I really found that with this whole exhibition, it was really experiences. Now, as you entered into the exhibition, there was a plaque on the wall that, as you were sort of handing your phone over, it explained, because, well, as you entered the exhibition, you weren't allowed to have your phone on you. So you were immediately greeted by essentially security guards who handed you over a little pouch, and you had to lock your phone in this pouch. And the only way to access your phone was to run it through a machine to unlock these bags. So there was no way you could get into your phone at any point in the exhibition. Now, I think the only time that's ever happened to me is when I've gone to like an experience like Secret Cinema or something in London, and you're not allowed to take any images of these sorts of places, but it's never happened to me in an exhibition. So that in itself was really interesting, and I was really interested to see how everybody would react with having their phone taken from them. Now, once your phone was taken from you, there was, first of all, this beautiful sign that said welcome. And it essentially explained why Banksy had selected Glasgow as the place to host his first official exhibition in 14 years. And I'm going to read you this extract, which is in the catalogue, that sort of explains why. So it says, welcome. If nothing else, you're going to see one masterpiece today. You have just walked past it. For anyone who isn't aware, the statue out the front has had a cone on its head continuously for the past 40 odd years. Despite the best efforts of the council and police, every time one is removed, another takes its place. This might sound absurd and pretentious. Well, just wait till you see the rest of the exhibition. But it's my favourite work of art in the UK, and it's the reason I've brought this show here. Now, the work that Banksy is referring to is the Duke of Wellington sculpture, which I've actually mentioned a couple of times on this podcast before. And it's a statue that stands in front of the Museum of Modern Art in Glasgow, MoMA as we call it, or GOMA rather, as we call it. And it, as Banksy has said, it is known because Glaswegians, the people of Glasgow, love putting a cone on its head. And it's been this bone of contention with the council and police, and there has been campaigns to raise the statue's plinth so people would stop climbing up it and putting a cone on its head. We know the statue is Conehead. That's what it's known. That's what kids are told it's called. No one really knows it's the Duke of Wellington. But it's become this real icon of Glasgow. And if you Google Glasgow cone sculpture, it will immediately come up, and it's world known and city celebrated. And essentially a couple of years ago, the council and the police were sort of like, right, we've tried our best, we're just going to leave the cone. We're just going to leave the cone where it is. So it's a mark of people in Glasgow, one, sort of showing their humour, but two, really owning and appreciating a public work of art that's there. And a very traditional work of art, because he's on a horse. It's an equestrian sculpture. But I love that it was a work of art that the public have taken over, that has drawn Banksy to Glasgow. It's a really important work for the city, and this exhibition was an incredible opportunity to sort of show that Glasgow is capable of hosting these big blockbuster exhibitions and coping with the demands of people and press. And I think Glasgow Life, who run Glasgow museums, completely smashed it out of the water. And yeah, it was, as I said, great show from start to finish. But essentially, this is how you're greeted. You hand over your phone, and then there's an explanation where he's like, this might not be a work of art, what you're about to see, but actually outside is. And I love it. It's my favourite thing. And this is why I've brought the show to Glasgow. So right away, he kind of has me as a Glaswegian in the palm of my hand, that he really understands our sense of humour. And that's something that I noticed throughout the show. There's a lot of humour in Banksy's work. That it's very intelligent, actually. It's very disruptive. And I think he saw that in what we do with this statue of the Duke of Wellington, aka Conehead. Now, the exhibition itself, you were very much, they sort of built these, I kind of felt like I was in a rat run. I don't know if you were meant to feel like that, but it was essentially the Glasgow Museum of Modern Art. When you walk in, it's this huge, big, open, expansive exhibition space. And what they had done is they had built all these tiny little rooms that you moved through, and then you sort of came out into like a huge central area, and then you went back into what I've coined the rat run. You went back in to see the other points, but it was essentially just little exhibition galleries that they had built that you moved through, but it very much felt like a rat run. It was narrow in places. It was dark, and the works were of course spotlighted and looking incredible. But even just the whole, I don't know, you were completely transformed and taken somewhere completely different. It wasn't this grand building anymore. It was these very intimate, enclosed spaces that were spotlighting and celebrating these incredible works of art. One of the first works that really stood out to me was the stab vest that Stormzy wore when he headlined Glastonbury. Now, it wasn't the original. It was the first attempt that Banksy had made and had shown to Stormzy. And there's a great exhibition. There was a really great explanation of how the stab vest came to be, and I'm going to read that excerpt to you now in the catalogue. Okay, so it says, it was June 2019 and I was drunk on a plane when the thought hit me, Stormzy should totally wear a Union Jack stab vest when he headlines the Glastonbury Festival next week. I got hold of an address for his management and sent a sketch. Surprisingly, they liked the idea and asked me to send one over. So then I had to make it. I sent a dressmaker friend to buy a pile of ex-police equipment and adjust to his measurements. A few days later, I was in her sitting room painting the vest when there was a knock at the door. 2 plain-clothed police detectives stood there saying they were responding to a tip-off that someone at her address had been purchasing items that could be used to impersonate a police officer. I crouched behind the door. She casually left half open with a brush. I crouched behind the door she'd casually left half open with a brush in my hand, thinking, this is how it all ends. I didn't expect gents tailoring to be my downfall. She ailed my fears by producing an array of feathered costumes, and 5 minutes later, they went on their way. What I loved, and something I haven't said so far, is that all the exhibition labels and plaques were written by Banksy. And what I found really approachable and endearing is that what I've just read to you, it's in his words and how he would speak. It's very just normal. It's not very academic. It's just very matter of fact, like, this is what happened, this is what we did. And it's a really lovely insight into these works and how you move through the space. Something I really loved as well, it was very much in keeping with the rawness of the stencils that he had on show, because there were stencils on show, but there was also physical work. So as I said there, there was one of his sample stab vest that he'd made, but I had no idea of that backstory, that it was actually Banksy's idea. And that what was very evident is that Banksy, although he's known as this lone wolf, he very much is not. He has a network of people and friends that he pulls on and asks for favours, and it's a real collaborative effort for Banksy for any of his works. And I really loved getting that inside scoop into what his thoughts were and what his approaches were to these sorts of things. He just seems to be a person that knows everybody, but I suppose if you're a street artist and you're Banksy, you pick up the phone and say who you are and you can open any door, really. But I really loved that this really rebelled against and disrupted what a museum show should be. It's not these educational, long-winded passages with words that completely confuse you. It's just him being like, this is what happened, this is what I did, right, let's move on to the next one. And I really loved, there was one point in the show as well where if you've ever been to a big exhibition, it's very normal that there's normally a quote on the wall in beautiful black matte vinyl, and it will say something, and then it would just have like the artist's name underneath the quote. It's a very standard thing to like fill a wall at an exhibition with an artist's quote. And what Banksy did was, for his quotes on the wall, he more or less just printed them off on really large font on A4 bits of paper, and then cut and stuck them to the wall, but didn't cut them out completely, just like tore around the lettering and stuck them to the wall. So it really gave this, I don't know, it just aesthetically, it just really worked with what was going on. So I really applauded Banksy and the team at Glasgow Museums and Glasgow Life for that type of exhibition design. It was really thoughtful and really cohesive to what was going on. Anyway, so the first part, you move through this sort of tiny rat run, if you will. There was space for people to move around. You got to see lots of different works from lots of different periods in time. Nothing was chronological. It was not a chronological show. And actually what I found very interesting is that he left his origin story, if you will, how he became Banksy, to the very, very end. And what I really found interesting, and something that I will continue to say, is that because nobody could look at their phone, because it was quite literally locked away in their pocket, the engagement that each piece got as you moved around was incredible. It was lovely to see, even at 1 a.m, there was families there, there were small children there speaking to family members and even just fellow visitors, discussing the works, standing in front of works, sharing their experiences, particularly in front of the Stormzy Fest, people being like, oh, I was at Glastonbury, oh, I couldn't get tickets that year, da, da, da. It was a really lovely way to bring people together and interact with people, even at 1 o'clock in the morning. And what I loved is I brought my mum, and my mum doesn't really go to museums very often, but she could very easily follow what was going on and really enjoyed it, because there was this social element that all you had to concentrate on was the show. And I thought it was genius. It was really, really genius. And as you moved from the BANKSY, when you moved from the BANKSY stab fest that he gave to Stormzy, you moved into a slightly larger room that was all about his very famous Love Is in the Bin, which was Balloon Girl, and this was the work that was shredded live at auction. And it was just great to like learn the story. And what they had done is they had taken apart the frame, and they've got all the mechanisms lying out to what essentially the frame in itself is a work of art. And the story goes that it was his friend that is a model boat enthusiast that he employed to build the frame. And the only reason that the canvas didn't shred completely was because part of it got caught up in the mechanism. And otherwise the whole thing would have shredded as the plan was. But it's hailed as this incredible moment within art history, contemporary art history and auction history, because it's the first work of art ever to be created live at an auction. And Banksy had done it thinking that the buyer would essentially pull out, and the buyer didn't pull out. She was like, no, I still want it, but my only request is, please, can you take out the mechanisms? Because what they didn't want to happen was she would wake up one morning and the whole thing was completely shredded. And in the catalogue, Banksy has this little passage where he was like, in fairness, I was also quite worried it would catch fire, so we were more than happy to take the work apart. I think I'll share an image online of just how intricate the workings within the frame are. It was amazing to see it. Again, it was offering you a backstory to this very iconic moment. And I think that's something that Banksy just is. He is iconic moment after iconic moment. You know, Stormzy Stabfest, this Love Is in the Bin, and, you know, these rats motifs that are everywhere. He is incredible at creating these moments of impact that you experience and that you live through. And I really loved that that shredder room, and it was a whole room dedicated to the skit, and it had the moment, the auction happening on loop, so people that didn't know, and someone like my mum, for example, she had absolutely no idea. For me, who works in the art world, this was such huge news. It happened during Frieze Week, which, for those of you that don't know, Frieze is an art fair, and it comes, you know, there's Frieze in New York, but there's also Frieze in London, and it's the biggest week in the art calendar in London, is in October. And of course there's lots of shows and auctions, so for Banksy to do this was just incredible, and very like, oh, how clever of Banksy to do this in the biggest week of the year. And it's just become this iconic moment within the art world. But for someone like my mum, who doesn't move in that circle and doesn't really pay attention to art, which is completely fine, it was really great for me also to like share that story with her and like show her a little bit of my world and tell her my experience with it. So I really loved it. And when you left the shredder room, you then moved into the central area of the exhibition where he had piled actual physical works. And this to me was incredible, because you came out of these, essentially these sort of, you know, over doors, you know, in like abattoirs or butchers or whatever, you have these very sort of heavy plastic, or like, you know, walk-in fridges, these very heavy plastic curtains that you can move through that keeps the cold in or whatever out. And you sort of move through this into this huge central area of the show. And it was just full of the most incredible works by Banksy. There was maybe 15 works in this space, and again, there was a very clear pathway marked out throughout the whole exhibition that you moved along. And you could take as much or as little time as you wanted throughout the show, which I loved as well. There was no one sort of like, right, you've got 3 minutes to view this room, go. Not that that normally happens, but in a show like this, when you're trying to get as many people through the door as possible and to see and experience the exhibition, you know, there can be a bit of a hold up in places. I also feel people took longer looking at things than what they normally would because they didn't have their phone. It was so clever. Anyway, so the first thing that you saw when you came out through these plastic curtains was this unbelievable work called Meat Pen. And I'm just flicking through the catalogue now to get to the extract because I had never seen this work. Sorry, Meat Truck. It's called Meat Truck, not Meat Pen. So Meat Truck is a work from 2013, so really not that long ago, 10 years ago. And the extract in the catalogue says, as part of my self-appointed artist in residency in New York, I had a truck full of petrified cuddly toys driven in circles around the streets for a month. 6 puppeteers in black lycra bodysuits were strapped into bucket seats and required to puppet with each limb for 8 hours a day, which ironically might be even worse conditions than the animals are put through. The mechanisms were a homemade mix of pulleys, strings, BMX brakes and drum kick pedals. And it's this really beaten down abattoir truck essentially, and it had all these cuddly toys sticking their heads outside it, and there was sound and movement happening within the truck, which was really punchy as you come through from this very sleek auction house room that was, well, it looked more like a workshop bench in it at one point, and then it had the lovely screen sort of showing you the beautiful interior of Sotheby's, and then you move through and it's bang, it's this meat truck right here with all these really scared looking cuddly toys, and they were moving, and it was unbelievable. And I do remember going like, wow, because the truck was huge, and even just the logistics of getting that in must have been no small feat. So again, hats off to Glasgow living, Glasgow life. I thought it was fantastic. And now this room, it sort of documented a lot of his better known works. There was a small booth reconstructed from Disneyland, which was his theme park that he opened a couple of years ago for like a pop-up period during the summer. There was also a reference to a work that he did at the Venice Biennale, which referenced the fact that despite it being the biggest art event in the world that happens every 2 years in Venice, he's never been invited. So last time round, he essentially disguised himself as a street seller and did a piece based on the large cruise ships that come into this small canal city. And yeah, I thought it was, I just thought it was great, really, really great. But in this section of the exhibition, there were people who were going around and asking you, did you want your photo taken? And you had to pick one work that you could have your photo taken, and you couldn't have a photo each. It was your group. All your group had to have one photo in front of a work, if you wanted, of course. But I thought that was fantastic because it really made you think about the works, what you want to pose in front of, what you want it to say about you. And we ended up posing in front of this phone booth that had essentially private eyes stenciled outside it, looking like they were sort of bugging your call and trying to hear what you were saying. And this was a nod to a series of works that Banksy has done that he essentially didn't mean for people to take part in initially. And it all started with this group of this work where he stenciled a Tesco bag on top of a flagpole flying in the wind. And Tesco, for those of you that don't know, who are listening from abroad, is a huge supermarket chain here in the UK. And it was a Tesco bag at the top of a flagpole floating in the wind. And it was a group of kids sort of pledging their allegiance to Tesco and this sort of big commercial giant. And he didn't intentionally mean for people to stand and pose next to it and also pledge their allegiance, but they did. And this got him thinking, oh, how else can he make work that people can finish, normal, everyday people can finish on their own terms? And I think that's a very interesting thing for an artist to do, is respond to how people have naturally interpreted your work, even when you haven't initially meant it to be like that. So yeah, I just think he's very responsive and reactive to what is going on, and he does play to the public on occasion, and yeah, just again trying to create moments that are interesting and enjoyable. Anyway, just as you were about to leave this sort of large section of the exhibition space, you got to the back of the meat truck, and you could actually climb inside and operate the puppets, and essentially for the next people sort of coming in through the door. So I thought that was a great thing to do, and I had loads and loads of fun doing that. I think it's great when you can physically operate a work and leave your mark in it. And what's great is the people that I was operating the work for didn't know, but had the same reaction that I did. They were like, oh my gosh, what is this? So I thought it was a really great way of allowing people to connect with each other as well. And very interestingly, people were quite hesitant to get into the truck, and because it's a real truck, which is very, very tight, I must say. It's very, very snug and operate it. But I thought it was fantastic. And then you moved through into the final section of the exhibition, which was all about Banksy's origin story, how he started. And how he started stenciling is actually quite heartbreaking. And I'm going to read you the passage from the exhibition catalogue. And it's the first page of the exhibition catalogue, and it's under the title, What's the Point? And it's called The Elevator Pitch. And he says, it might just be a coincidence, but I only started painting graffiti in earnest after I found myself friendless, unemployed, and heartbroken. I had moved to a new city with my girlfriend after hustling as work at a dispatch centre through my previous job. However, things soon started to unravel. I was mercilessly bullied by my new colleagues, and my girlfriend ran off with the supervisor. He had a car. I handed in my notice and considered scratching up the boss's car, but realised that would have been childish. So instead, I took the lift to the vacant top floor, wedged the door open, and painted a swarm of ants all over it before setting off the fire alarm. It felt like I had finally found a practical application for art. Revenge. And in the exhibition, there was this incredible mock-up of an elevator and him essentially stenciling lots and lots of ants, which were a huge part of his practice, stenciling ants for years and years. And it was just amazing to see, and also learn that from heartbreak comes an incredible creative outpour. Now, a lot of the next section of the exhibition, as I said, was very much Banksy's origin story, how he started stenciling, how the rat became his motif. He had this really interesting comment where he said, you know, when you paint something a few times, people call you repetitive. But when you paint something hundreds of times, it becomes a motif. So I really enjoyed that little thought starter actually from Banksy, in terms of, oh yeah, it's so true. Like, when are you not being repetitive, and when is it actually you just sort of finding your style and having your calling card? I found it really, really interesting. There was a great section on how his family were a big influence completely accidentally when he was a child. And then there was this really lovely section that I'm going to read to you, again from the catalogue, and it's all about why he's a graffiti artist, and why he's done what he does, and why he keeps to do what he does. And so he says, I often get asked why I do this. Actually, I don't, but that seemed a good way to justify what's coming next. The answer is, it helps me sleep. To leave home in the middle of the night, stomach knotted, mouth dry, bowed head full of plans gone over 50 times, to weave between the drunk, the suspicious, and the underpaid, ever mindful of the 1,000 beady eyes on poles with a ready story for the police. To come up to a wall with pre-shaking cans, a clangy ladder dampened with a tibble, to press the cap and know as the first sprit of paint hits the wall that it's too late to turn back. To focus laser-like, moving fast and accurate without a pause unless signalled by your friend to remain motionless. Trying to be quiet, trying to quiet your breath, and then to say, that'll do, never knowing if it's really finished, and to leave with your head bowed once more, at every corner a little more confident that you've gotten away with it. To leave with your head bowed once more at every corner, a little more confident you've gotten away with it. Until the key is in the lock, the door is closed on the world, picking big lumps of paint from your nostrils, you collapse on the sofa into sleep. The sweetest sleep you will ever have. Again, I just feel that there's such a human element to this. It's a real fabulous insight into Banksy, who he is as an artist, what his inner workings are, and something that he doesn't really ever share with people. And I found his honesty just really refreshing and very down to earth. I thought it was incredible. And when you, in the final room, as I've said, you sort of move through and you sort of read his origin story and you read about his rats, as, you know, was he repeating, is it a motif, and looks at some more iconic works and things that are, there's a brief section of it that speaks about works that are no longer in existence because, you know, people have come and taken them away, or they've been, the council have painted over them. And for him, he says those are the works that mean the most. They were there for a moment and then they're gone. And regardless of all the physical works that he produces, the most important works to Banksy is his graffiti works on the street. So I thought it was wonderful. And then as you move through, weirdly, you go through the shop. You went through the shop where you could buy a catalogue, or you could buy a t-shirt, or you could buy a poster. And then your phone was unlocked. And the last two rooms that you moved through were really quite interesting. The last room was a mock-up of Banksy's boyhood bedroom. So his childhood bedroom. And you can see the Apache helicopters and the soldiers and the guns and the toys that are present in his room, in the games, in the books that he was reading. So it's iconography that he has grown up with and has spilled into his life as an adult. So I thought that was a really interesting comment on what you expose a child to does carry with them through the rest of their life, be that subconscious or not. And part of me wonders where, you know, was that a mock-up or a pretense? But I really don't think it is, because these motifs are so prominent in Banksy's work. The police helmets, the helicopters. Again, there was a whole story with the police helmets being that he lived on a huge council estate and there was lots of riots that happened, or a huge riot that happened, and it was really ingrained into him, that memory from a young age, like watching police sort of batter into people and people retaliate back. So to be in that space, that, yeah, just to sit in that room and just be like, wow, like from this quite dark surrounding, something incredible has happened. And he's gone on to be one of the most powerful, influential, and also politically minded artists. Banksy is incredibly forthright in his opinions and where he places works in order to send messages, and also how he uses his money. You know, he's an incredibly wealthy artist now. How he uses these funds from exhibitions like this to help charities and people in need. And I was reading before pressing record that actually he makes most of his money doing films or sort of producing films and merchandise about him. That's kind of where he makes his money nowadays. But yeah, still multi-million-pound artist several times over. And then finally, the last room in the exhibition before you sort of were released once again onto the streets of Glasgow was a room where you could graffiti the wall, and you could graffiti in any way that you wanted using these paint pens. And of course, it was completely covered from ceiling to floor. But I thought it was a really, again, another lovely way to feel part of that and leave your mark on the exhibition. And again, being rebellious and disruptive in a space, you know, a museum, you don't write on the walls, you don't interact with the objects. And again, he's just being disruptive and just very Banksy about the whole thing. When I left, it was one of these things where I turned to my family and I was like, what did you think? And my mum was like, loved that. I thought that was really great. My younger sister loved it. I thought it was incredible. And we just sort of went home so full of joy. And yeah, it was really interesting for me because I knew so much about Banksy. He is an artist that is constantly covered in the press. I, have a subscription to something called I have a subscription to something called the Art Newspaper. I am very familiar with Banksy. He is constantly covered in these types of papers and newsletters that I'm subscribed to because it's my job, it's what I'm passionate about, and I'm just constantly seeing stuff about him. So it was really lovely as well for me to walk around and explain things to my family as well in context and be like, oh, he did this for here, and this is a really good thing about this, and actually the money that he raised from this, that he did this with and helped these people. So it was a really fantastic exhibition, and I've been incredibly lucky this year. I've seen 3 of the best exhibitions I have ever seen in my life, and Banksy Cut and Run is definitely up there. There's lots and lots of reasons for this. I don't think that the fact that it was in Glasgow is a small part. I think it's a huge part that he has. It just made me proud to be Glaswegian, and that he wanted this show to be in my home city. It was fun, it was disruptive, it was everything that Banksy stands for, and it really made me think in my own personal practice about how to be disruptive within the system and how you can rebel in a way that is educational, and how you can start to form your own narratives in spaces that aren't for you and traditionally wouldn't accept shows like a Banksy show or a graffiti artist show. I just thought it was fantastic. And what's even better is that Cut and Run is not a one and done exhibition. No, it is not. If you Google Banksy Cut and Run, it's got its own website, and it says the following. So, Banksy Cut and Run, a history of cutting shapes out of cardboard, spraying paint through them, and then running away. Thanks, Glasgow. It's been a blast. We want to take the show on the road, but have no idea where to go to next. Do you? Mail us with your suggestions and include a few pics if possible. A specific location or venue would be ideal. Please don't just write, come to Iran. Thanks. And you email venues@cutandrun.co.uk. So there you are. If you're listening all over the world and you think, I quite fancy having Cut and Run come to our local venues, our local museums, our local sites, why not get in touch? This exhibition was incredible, and I would really, really recommend, if you are a Banksy fan, to go on to Glasgow Living, which is the Glasgow Museum's website. And if you go onto their website, they have a whole section of Banksy things that you can purchase. You can purchase the posters that were available during the exhibition. I think you can still purchase the t-shirts, but if not, you can definitely purchase Cut and Run, which is the exhibition catalogue. Maybe check on Amazon if it's available as well. But if possible, please do buy it from Glasgow Museums. They post it all over the world, and you are helping a local museum when you buy directly from them instead of going to Amazon. So I bought my catalogue directly from Glasgow Museum's website. I also bought posters from Glasgow Museum's website. And what is very interesting is that the posters, to buy 2 posters of the show, it's £15. And if you Google, just go online now and Google Banksy cut and run posters, they are selling for hundreds of pounds on places like eBay. I've seen them on art sites. And if you want them, you can pick them up for £15, which is just so typical Banksy. He makes it affordable. He makes it enjoyable for everybody. So to sum up, what am I trying to say about this show? It was disruptive. It was thought-provoking. It was inspiring. It brought you together as a group. It brought you together as a community, actually. I thought the fact that you couldn't have your phone was genius. I think I've left this exhibition thinking that Banksy is just hands down a genius. He is so clever and intelligent, and I think to produce works that look simple but have such an impact is the height of what a genius does. They make things look easy, and they're really, really not. It's only grown my love and appreciation for what Banksy does and what he stands for. And I would thoroughly encourage you, if you ever get the chance to see a Banksy show, be that official or unofficial, although official is always best. It would be... And when I say official and unofficial, there are lots of Banksy shows, but when I say unofficial, it means that people or private collectors or private institutions have put an exhibition on without collaborating with Banksy, whereas the show that was on in Glasgow Museums was very much a collaboration with Banksy and his team, which are called Pest Control. It was just fantastic, and I really hope this has given you a small insight into what the exhibition was like. And if Cut and Run ends up near where you are, do let me know. And there you have it, another episode of Jo's Art History podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please make sure to like, rate and subscribe. It does really help in letting other people find us. You can listen to Jo's Art History podcast on any streaming platform, and you can also watch it in a video format on YouTube. If you would like to support the podcast in any way, I have now released an Amazon wish list, which you can also find in the show notes below. This will allow you to donate in part or purchase in full an art historical text that is of interest to me and that will help in research towards future episodes. And it would be really wonderful if you've listened to quite a lot of these, if you could buy that as a way of marking patronage towards the podcast. That would be brilliant. If you would like to get in touch, please do. It's always lovely to hear from people. You can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can get in touch with me via Instagram, which is @joesarthistory, or you can search for my name, Jo McLaughlin, via Instagram, and you will find me there. That's all we have from the podcast this week. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, I'll remind you to keep learning, and remember, art is for all. Bye.